Alrighty. Good evening. December is here. December. That's the name of the month. I always thought it was an interesting kind of thing that we ignore that happened over time at some point, where things got shifted, and not in some weird way, but in an interesting way. Like for instance, December is named so because of the prefix of Deca. And how do I know that? Well, same thing with November, which has the prefix of 9, nueve, right? October, oct, 8. And yet, those are at 10, 11, and 12. And so at some point, some stuff got stuffed into the year, and we, went from 10 to 12, or maybe we, kind of shifted our perception of time as far as the years or months are. And of course, that's quite documentable and researchable and knowable. Different cultures all look at time in their own way, and how they name time can be very different from culture to culture. There's a difference between us emerging from the past into the future as a sense of time, compared to kind of always being in this state of nowness, and the past and the future are kind of like both equally a bubble around us, and we view them as sort of one thing. There's lots of ways to play with our perceptions of time. But it's interesting that, the naming of the months and how we sort of just take for granted, these months that seem to have a number in their name, but they don't land at their ordinal position, right? You'd think that Deca would be the 10th month. Well, perhaps it was the 10th month at some point. Perhaps that's leading to a way of thinking of sort of taking the year as a decimal system and breaking it into 10 instead of 12. And like, why do we use 12? Does it have something to do with, the fee and these other things, or some ratio, some magic number? There are some interesting correlations, but, it doesn't really point to any why-ness, and so it's very important when you're looking at stuff like that you are critical about what it all means, and not forget where the story of the meaning actually comes from, so that we can see what we're actually being told here. The same way the normal distribution can be used in predicting things, almost from a subconscious level. Like we all kind of have that bell curve in our heads, I think, to a certain degree, or in our hearts. And it helps us to, react to that little spidey sense. We can even take that to the next level and, provide ourselves with a canvas of symbols in order to have that interpretation facilitated whenever we want. We can kind of ask that sense what it thinks about things. Similar to, bouncing the idea off of a bunch of people that you trust. If you have a honed, intuitive part of yourself where you have developed a trust and an understanding that the integrity is more important than the feeling, that can be very useful to you as a tool. Or you could even, recognize the fact that you are reacting in an emotional state, and that gives you the sort of the vector, the direction to look at in your life and say, okay, well, I'm reacting in these ways. I normally seem to have my act together, but when I get triggered by these things, and those things that trigger me, those are the pressure points that crack, right? Those are the spots to look at and say, well, am I really identifying with my reaction here, or should I take a step back and kind of see where that comes from and maybe realize that it's not so useful to feel that way so quickly. Maybe it is useful. If there's a bear, run. right? But if there is no bear, let's just relax for a minute and see if it turns out that there is no bear. So, I thought it'd be neat tonight to sort of just chill a little bit and have a conversation. Keep it light. I don't know if I'm able to do that, but I'm going to try. Maybe do some readings and talk about through that process, what motivates the actual question, and more appropriately, like, what is it we're really seeking, so that we can get to the heart of the answer together. That is what you came here to do for real, like why we actually are here in this moment. I have a tool that I use for teaching and otherwise. It's essentially the Kabbalistic rose, but I etched it on slate. So and with chalk, you can very easily sort of manipulate it and erase it and manipulate it. And so it's a quick way to viscerally go through experience of drawing the sigils. Or, for obvious reasons, you could have a sigil there present and have it in the space as, for magical purposes at any time. It's kind of a handy little tool that I use. And so I thought it would be neat to kind of bring it out and maybe, see what some of the names look like out there. It's interesting when you take your name, turn it into numbers, and you can have some fun with those shapes. It gives us an excuse to, look at other numbers and look at how the sigils kind of all come together. It's really a lot of fun, and it's as serious as you take it. It's as serious as you take it, right? If you want to take it really seriously, some of these shapes do some interesting things. They correlate in interesting and fun ways that, maybe we can overthink. Or maybe we're not overthinking. And, that's I address that often, here on the channel. But we can't forget that these are just tools. They're the toys of the sage, right? And what are they designed to do through that play? Not just learn. It's the act of observation and the act of discovering all the ways that you can have the universe speak back. Kind of poking at the universe and seeing all the ways you can get it to react. Isn't that what all science, all poetry and art really is? I mean, you could say, well, I'm trying to communicate a certain thing, or I'm trying to, share something, or I'm trying to understand something. And I use the creative process to go through that, right? That's fine, sure. There's some truth in that, I suppose, but the question is what's the motivation behind it to begin with, right? Like the compulsion to understand. Sometimes it's in the act of attempting to understand that we lose sight of the thing that we're trying to communicate with, right? Trying to dissect or interrogate. Whatever the thing is that we're trying to understand, we get further away from as we get closer to defining. And so finally, when we've come to the definition of what we think the thing is, it's no longer the thing, it's just the definition. And then it just becomes a symbol of that definition, and it loses what it is. I'll tell you what it is. It's cold. I know that because I can feel it compared to the air. It's cooler than the air. It's heavy for its size, I guess. And again, that's a judgment based on picking up other things that are sizes and kind of developing a vocabulary, right? But it's my knowledge of it from touching it not calling it anything, is, oh, it's heavy for its size. I was surprised by its weight, right? It subverted expectation there. Allow for the moment for those to not be ears. They don't have the job of swatting flies. They don't have the job of increasing the surface area so that the circulation can help cool the animal. They don't have the purpose of directing the pressure difference in the air and thus allowing the waves to enter the ears. That's not the reason. There's no reason. The reason is that's the way the metal fell, and when it cooled, it took that shape. Why did it wind up in a liquid state to begin with? Well, there's this idea of a society, you see. And people have the capacity to, through the act of creation or modification, can share what they modified in a contractual exchange for something called currency, and that motivates them to create these. And so the liquefaction of the metal was designed to facilitate that by being the thing in between, the thing exchanged, to allow for that to take place. That's why it's shaped like an ear. And no other reason. From the perspective of the maker. And why is it a Ganesha? Because it wasn't the Buddha model. If the metal got poured in the Buddha model, it would be the Buddha. Very interesting kind of thought process, right? Just sort of realizing each thing is really just necessitated by something else unaware, and sort of goes through the process of making it happen until we find this thing. And this thing is for its own sake. It just exists because it exists. And I'm not sure if it's going to affect its existence from its perspective. If I call it a Ganesha or I call it a paperweight, it doesn't care. It will change based on my perception of it, because I'm going to utilize it in a different way, and that utilization will change its ultimate form in a way different than if I called it something else. If I call it a paperweight, I'm going to sit it up a lot of the time, and it's going to be touched in a certain manner, and so I'm going to weather it in the back more often, and so forth. If I, use it as a reverent image of a deity, I'm going to polish it and care for it and not touch it in certain places or touch it in other places, and so forth, and it will appear different over time. In and of itself, it does not participate in that process other than to provide its form and to persist. And of course, that's another dangerous word, isn't it? Persist. Does anything ever, or is everything always in the state of becoming? And the reason that it appears to persist is because we keep the definition. And it's the definition that persists. It's the word that persists. And there it is, because the words are necessitated. Words don't exist until they're needed. There's a moment of the desire to speak or the desire to understand that a vocabulary is necessitated, therefore provided by your mind. What am I saying? What am I hearing? I want to communicate this thing. What words should I use? I just heard words. What did they mean? That's an act of the necessity to speak, to communicate. And in that, a vocabulary it comes along as a secondary need for that to take place, right? And so now you have this idea of vocabulary, language, is actually just the product of the necessity to speak. And to see a thing for what it is, we need to in some way witness it, and at the same time resist the necessity to speak, so that we negate the creation of the vocabulary, the necessity for a vocabulary, an identity in order to parse the meaning. right? That all comes after we've decided to define the thing, decided a conversation needs to take place, decided that we need to either speak or be spoken to and understand what's being spoken. And instead, just take the thing for what it is. Man, there's a lot of symbols. The rose cross, the eye on top of the Vesica Pisces, the green of the heart chakra, the green of Netzach, of Venus, the Sigillum Dei Amet. On top of it, we have the sacred Ganesha, the Platonic solids and in all their beautiful glory. A piece of amber, a snapshot of the past. Beautiful color, by the way. It's not so easy to see it on camera. It's virtually a rainbow. The Christ, the rosary, the elements, the key, the unicursal hexagram. A beautiful piece of antique jewelry of sapphire. The pentacle of the magus. The student, let's be honest. The scrying device. So, it's not that everything I just said is bullshit. It's just that everything I just said is only correct from one perspective and under one circumstance. And only for one moment. But always for the same purpose. And that is to justify the self that you find yourself being without realizing or participating in, but nonetheless. And the facilitation of such by the identity telling the story about why it was chosen, and you identifying with that story and saying, yeah, it was my decision. I believe it means that. I chose that. That was my decision. Choosing, deciding. These are all products of the identity. Who's making the choice? What decision? Who's deciding? And why was the decision necessitated to begin with? That's the real question. What should I eat? Well, why am I hungry? Am I hungry? All right, that's the deeper question. It's not about the decision you make on what to eat. It's on the decisions you eat to begin with. And what actually drove that appetite? What actually decided at that moment? Seek. Was it a necessity? Did your body needed the energy, or was it a reaction to a limbic system that has been under attack by every direction possible for since birth? To be so hyper aroused and stimulated that we don't know what an appetite is. We just know we need to satisfy it. And so it's not about what we satisfy that with. It's why we feel like we need to be satisfied in that moment. As if there's something missing. Is there a bear in the room? Then you don't have to run. You got a big ditch to dig tomorrow and you're going to need all kinds of energy, and so you have to hurry up and pack on those calories to make sure that you have the energy store so that you can, do that hard labor? Probably not. Okay, so then, although you might have a little tinge of hunger, you're going to be fine, most people. Sometimes you're hungry for real. There's a lot of people out there that are hungry for real. And that's not some kind of judgment, and that's not some kind of... I'm just pointing out that we need to make sure that we are aware of where our appetites come from. And most importantly, when we feel like we need to eat, when we feel like we need to swipe, when we feel like we need to get that little dopamine hit, we can think to ourselves, wait a minute, like, it's not about making a choice right now, or why did I even decide to eat to begin with? Silence has a right to be heard. It's sort of the beauty of the freedom of being a human being. We have the capacity to deny our appetite if we realize that it's not appropriate, and it allows us to weather when we don't have the things that we know that we need, and move toward getting it. And when that's all put together in the right way, and you have the position of authenticity in your decision, more often than not, health, joy, and ease of anxiety and pressure is the result. It's just sort of it's like swimming with the current. Not only are you going in the direction everything is going anyway, but it's there to carry you with it. It takes a majority of the burden with you, falling forward in a sense, right? We're all going to fall, and try to fall forward. And when you don't, it's okay. Of course you're going to fall. That's actually what we're here to do. That was on purpose. One of the cool god names, this is a fun exercise, we're being playful right now, don't forget we're playing with toys. One of the god names that's very, very prominent is El, right? Elohim, and the El, it's the suffix in the ShemHaMephorash for the masculine energy of the angel names. This prefix and or suffix, or in some cases just the name itself. It's used and misused, understood, misunderstood, all over the place. And that's Aleph Lamed, and that looks like, on the Kabbalistic rose, just a line going down from the Aleph to the Lamed. That's it. There's the name of God. A name going down. Just a line. It's very interesting. That's okay. Wouldn't that be the case in any two-letter combination? Well, yes, but no. I mean, obviously the angle would change. There's only a couple of letters that you could draw and have a straight line, right? Going up and down, like without any angle. But of course, any two-letter combination, with the exception of a double letter, which oftentimes for sigils is drawn as a loop back on itself, in some degree, right? Or in some cases, it's strictly there's a line and then like a jagged sort of return. But nonetheless, depends upon the individual at the moment and sort of how they use their sigils, whether they use them as angular or round. It's very personal. And so there's a couple other letters that you could do that with. There's the He or the Tzadi, depending upon if you change the Tzadi and the He astrologically, which I do. Or if you were to go here and draw to that letter, right? Or here to draw to that letter, between these two. There's various places where if you wanted to do an up and down kind of two-letter word, you could certainly do that. And if you wanted to go from up here to the Aleph, that would be a separate line, right? That's separate from this line, right? And so these are all just different two-letter. And so, let's not get too hung up on the meaning of the fact that Al just is a line from the middle to the out, but it kind of is interesting. It starts in this sort of middle, just to really put a good perspective on that. It starts from this middle area of this rose. at that aleph and then draws down to that lamed on the bottom, right? And it has to cross over this dalet in order to do that, right? Which is very similar to this idea here of the two crossing over to the 3 and that dalet being in between. There's this kind of correlation of this descent being this idea of the separation of the listener and the speaker. Things getting flip-flopped as they descend on the tree. It's all very philosophical language in order to facilitate an understanding of a concept that really is not the words being spoken. There's signs to the idea, right? There's a lot of different symbol systems that are used for sigil magic. Some of them are linear in nature, where the alphabet is laid out in a different fashion. Or as an example, let me grab something like this, or the Sator square is another one, which is a 5x5. It's the second pentacle of Saturn. This is the first of the Solomonic planetary magical system. But nonetheless, you could draw a line between certain phases of the 4 worlds, as an example, using that type of system. There can certainly be sigil systems developed around and have been used very often. This is Duquette's, the Lamal Duquette and Constance, Tarot Ceremonial Magic. There's lots of different ways that you could apply sigil magic to this idea, especially when you consider what you're looking at as far as the 4 fixed signs and the what's actually happening here in the center here. And so that said, the table that's used in the Enochian system of calls is also in a sense visually a holographic echo of what's being spoken when you draw the lines on the tablet, when you're looking for the particular planets and when you're calling a specific angel name, right? Whether you do the spirals or you're doing the specific names across the crosses, the sub, like all this. If you consider when you're speaking that name, you're also tracing its shape in the space of states where it appears in a form such as the rose. And there is a correlation on the rose to the Enochian system, obviously through the planets and signs. And so there's a, unbeknownst to the magician, or in full knowledge of the magician, there's the sigil being drawn in that space, right? It exists as an echo, as a reflection, because it exists in all worlds at the same time in the form that it takes in that world. And so the world of thoughts is different than the world of physicality in the manner that they are perceived. And that's the only difference. There's no difference in their existing, their weight of existence. They're measured differently because they're perceived from a different lens. It's the same thing from a different lens. We try to talk about that as far as dimensionality, and then it gets kind of into the realm of metaphysical woo when you start speaking about higher dimensions. Higher dimensions are simply another variable in the matrix of the math. Like you just add a z to the coordinate system, and that's 4th dimensional math. It's really basic. Let's not get too crazy, which is funny because we still manipulate that math in a 2D environment, right? The act of applying mathematics is a 2-dimensional process. The way we manipulate the symbols, the way we navigate them in our math, the way we put them down on paper and move them around and or is it one? Is it a 1-dimensional machination? I mean, it's a philosophical conversation about that. Is it 2D in the brain? What are we thinking? Are we thinking what is the dimensionality of figuring out a math problem on paper? We're comparing apples and oranges here, right? We're getting hung up on what are you talking about? all these concepts swimming around that require words. They are born out of the need to understand, the need to be understood, instead of allowing the thing to be what it is, which is the thing spoken, the thing that you witnessed to begin with, that does not require a definition for it to exist. It does not require a definition for it to be experienced. And in fact, profoundly, when you do experience a thing without the necessity to understand or speak, you're finally able to see the thing for what it is. And in that moment, you might just wind up seeing yourself. You might wind up just seeing the truth, the thing that we're all seeking. Just maybe. And even if it's just for a second, you know that a second is forever. And forever is just a second. And anytime you recollect that sensation, you share space with it. You can return to that silence. Clear your mind. And participate in the recreation of the identity you will be when you suddenly require meaning again. But it's coming from a different perspective, one of realizing that that's the case and that you are really this thing in the silence playing a game. So we can have fun with our math, and we can have fun with our symbols, and we can have fun with our color and our names and our angels and our demons and our shapes and our spinny things. This is one of my favorite spinny things. This is the moment of our birth. This is the moment of our union. This is the moment of our creation. This is the moment of our separation. This is where our alphabet comes from. All of our mathematics. It's all tied up in here in a strange, weird, interesting way that is so misunderstood that it's actually formed religions and cults. But nonetheless, it's just... Please hear me. I hear you. You heard me? I did. That's all it was. The mistake. the hearing the voice and thinking it was somebody else, and not realizing that was you crying out. That's okay. I get it. It was dark and lonely, and you were there for a long time. Who knows how long before you became self-aware? It could have been, as close to infinity as you can imagine. Ooh, it's kind of blood-curdling when you think about it. And then you become self-aware in that darkness, in that loneliness, in that nothingness. What would you do? Well, God created the universe. God imagined not being alone. I imagine I would do the same thing. Create a beautiful simulated universe to experience every experience that can be experienced from every possible angle possible. That sounds like something God would do. Sounds like something God did, and what we're looking at is that happening, right? They say God spoke existence into reality, right? The Big Bang is God speaking fiat lux, whatever. However you want to interpret or misinterpret the beginning of the Bible, Bereshit, Bara. And God said, let there be light. No. What we're witnessing is that being spoken. He didn't say it, he's saying it. You are saying it. We are all saying it. And hearing it being said at the same time right now. It's happening. We're in the middle. We're like Finnegan's Wake. It starts in the middle of a sentence. The period hasn't been put down yet, right? Magic is so much bigger than some of the things that we're falling for. You know, I did a lecture a couple years back called Unicorns Are Real. And, you know, I took it seriously. I was, speaking to an intelligent adult grounded group of minds about this subject, right? We weren't taking any kind of fantastical, but I was being serious. And what I meant by that is that there's a certain point that you reach in your thinking, a certain point of understanding where these thoughts and images and symbols come from, what language really is, our participation in that process. We enter the sanctum. We achieve knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. We ascend to the whatever, not and so forth. We grind down the rock and we bake up the philosopher's scone. Who was it that said that? Was that Craig or Cunningham? I forget who said that. It was a magician who was funny guy. That's hysterical, right? Once we've done that and we reach that moment, we can understand what the statement "unicorns are real" really means. I wonder if it uses baking powder or something. Well, it's got to be soda. Come on, it's reactive. Or is it, it's bicarbonate. I mean, bicarbonate. But yeah, that's funny. I don't know, but I bet you it's delicious, right? I mean, it's the manna, the bread of life. It's the, No, the bread of life is clearly monatomic gold, which was given to us by the 13th dimensional Atlantean Thoth. Okay, okay. That's fine. I tell you what, again, I'm fine with that story. As long as you use it as a symbol system of realizing that story is a signpost. It's pointing to something else. It is not the thing itself. Pardon me. It's not the thing itself. And that story can be highly effective in that case. You can kind of overlay it onto other stories and see where there's maybe correlations or cracks or symbols or patterns that we hadn't noticed. And it's very useful to do that sometimes as an exercise. But nonetheless, in fact, it's very useful to do that as an exercise. So that's fine if you want Thoth to be a 13th dimensional being from Atlanta. That's good. But did you read the words on the emerald tablet, or are we too worried about where it came from? Is it made of emerald, or is it actually moldavite? Moldavite was the actual stone used in the carving of the cup of Christ, right? The Holy Grail was made of, it's not emerald, it's moldavite. The emerald tablet is an emerald, it's moldavite. Which means it's alien, it's reptilian, it's dark. Right? I mean, the thinking can go all over the place. It doesn't matter. If you have a story and a symbol system that is consistent for you, and you have the maturity, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, to recognize it's simply a system pointing to something else in the same way that we use words to elicit and to point to an emotional response that can be recalled in another person. Love. I miss you. I'm glad you're here. These are words that point to a thing that I want you to feel, because I want you to know that that's what I'm feeling. But forget about the words. The feeling in you right now when I say those words, the feeling you're feeling, that's the thing, not the words I use to make the thing happen inside of you in an attempt to give you what I have in the moment, right? So we have to do the same thing with our stories about the emerald tablet or moldavite, or why amethyst has something, whatever, to do with the throat shot, whatever. Green being the heart chakra, having to do with Netzach being green because of Venus, and simmer down. There's an idea that's really hard to convey. And there's multiple symbol systems that we can use to try to transmit that. And in the same way, this very much alive, intelligent thing with a momentum and a will and a vector, the outside world, the zeitgeist, the Moloch, this thing that is speaking back to us, is doing the same thing. And it's really just momentums doing what they do, and cycles doing what they do. And it's not always so obvious that something can be intelligent and have a will and have a means of fulfilling that will that isn't sort of like a person, like an anthropomorphized animal with a brain. You know, it seems strange. And yet, you know, we throw around words like angel and demon when we don't recognize that what I'm talking about are angels and demons. And it's sort of like the meme culture is a perfect idea of how a thing can spread and grow, like actually increase its mass. And it'd be something as simple as an idea that arguably doesn't have a mass. It's just your brain changing states, and so nothing grew or changed, but that idea has mass because it's in multiple brains. It just continues to pass through the group and so on until this idea becomes a thing called human, which is separate from Homo erectus. It's not a gradient, right? Or is it a gradient? One side will call me a fool, another side will call me a heretic. You know what I call me? A Michael. Am I a human being? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you know, you do the test and you figure it out. I haven't done the DNA test, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, my parents were human, at least from my definition of whatever that is, which is, you know, just far enough removed from the Cro-Magnon or Homo erectus or some of these other, that I guess, well, we have less hair, and our brains are bigger, you know, I mean, like the weight, the capacity is and that the density of the brain does apparently have a pretty decent effect on our capacity to lie to ourselves, right? And so humans have this insane capacity to do that, and so we have this beautiful world that we've created and can even, you know, use it to create technology, and it's really something. I'm not saying it's not useful. But yes, unicorns are real. And you know, there are different states of consciousness. We know, you know, we're not just talking about these things. If you find yourself in the position of having the motivation to practice these things, to do the meditation, to, you know, go through the machinations of the silliness of the language with Gematria and Nitoricon and Tamura, and, you know, realize it's the same thing that intelligence agencies have been doing for thousands of years to kind of hide information, and that data analysts have been doing for thousands of years to find information, and you know, it's you know, sometimes you have to really more appropriately just ask the question of who is writing or hiding this, and what is their motivation. So you don't even need to get to the code. You understand why they spoke to begin with, and so that you can address. And when you address that, it doesn't matter what they said. That might help you in the, you know, tactically, right? I mean, it'll help you in the moment to make the decision. What do I want to eat? Right? Do I trust this person I'm buying a car from? But, you know, in the grand scheme, it's really obvious that, you know, someone's motivation. If there's, you know, suddenly a sale where, you know, that thing that everybody knows wasn't so nice a month ago is suddenly nice and shiny and cheap and readily available. And so, Critical thinking is a step back. It requires an active role. It's one that has been attacked on purpose with the intent of desensitizing to such a degree that we kind of even don't realize we're in the position of letting go. We almost think we have agency and are making decisions, and when we're not. It's really something. And it can be hard to get out of that cycle until you realize that the whole cycle is really the thing we need to get out of. And I mean, just step off the wheel. And, the truth, the real silence is the lack of the necessity to speak, the lack of the need to understand, to become the understanding, which is that I know myself. I see you and I know who you are. I know you can see me, and I hope that you know who I am. And when we're in that space together, we literally occupy the same space. We literally occupy the same time. Which is right now, right here, always. It's not eternal, it's infinite. It's not forever, it never wasn't. Practice sacred silence. Sacred silence is the lack of the necessity to speak because you're understanding. It's not dark. It's there's no words. I won't. This tool is designed to elicit that. And so then when we understand that truth, we can now go to it and understand what these symbols really mean and who is on the other side. Who are we actually speaking to? Who is answering us when we ask a question? Or is it our heart? Is it our mind? Are we just throwing symbols together? Are we making it up? No. We know who's talking. We know what's being said. Take a look at what's going on in the world right now. From my perspective, I am here. And this is my world right now. Let me adjust this so that it's more accurate as far as the clock. Due to some confusion on whether we want to put things forward or back an hour in the United States, let's not go there. A lot of different ways that you can look at the chart. And right now I just sort of have the house system, which is basically how it lays out the signs, nullified. So it just puts Aries to the east, and sort of everything else adjusts according to that. Okay, so just to be clear, that's what you're looking at. Another very interesting way of looking at the chart is called heliocentric, which is from the perspective of the sun. And so you'll notice that the sun is not a symbol on this chart any longer, and we have a new symbol, which is the earth. If you're not sure where to look, it's right by the moon, because from the perspective of the sun, the earth and the moon virtually occupy the same space, right? And so when we look down here, we see this symbol where the moon is. The earth is right there. We're a little twin system that, from the perspective of the sun, it's the same position. And you'll see where we are right now from the perspective of the sun is Gemini, which is opposite Sagittarius. Just a little bit of mechanical astrology there as far as when you swap angles and take the perspective of the sun, you're going to see the opposite sign on Earth. Right? And again, I'll flip the chart back to our perspective, and you'll see that, now the sun is in Sagittarius, which is opposite where it just was in Gemini. And so here we have the sun, Sagittarius, and it was opposite in Gemini. And so all kinds of different information on here that, one day I plan on going through sort of basics with respect to some of the machinations I've been talking about, and then having some people on that have a much more robust experience in teaching the science. So some of this information I think is very good as a basis for understanding the language of the tree, right? The language of the signs and planets. And so when we see something like the sun in Sagittarius or the moon in Aries, we can apply our vocabulary of the tarot to that process. Sagittarius being the temperance or the art card, right? The sun is the sun card. Right? The moon is the high priestess, right? Aries is the emperor, and so forth, right? And you can apply these to have a greater understanding of some of the mechanics of the meanings behind the astrological chart and how it's interpreted. Or go even a step further and go into the Kabbalistic of, Sagittarius is the letter Samek, right? Aries is the letter Tzadi, right? Venus is the letter Dalet, and so forth. And so, and take sort of like a more maybe Kabbalistic approach, or this is actually my pentacle that I use, pantacle that I use personally, which is sort of a combination of the alchemical idea of the salt, sulfur, mercury stage of the transformation process, and the Kabbalistic. It's sort of a combination of the two. But that said, it's by taking a look at the one symbol system and applying it to the other, gives us this sort of access to where maybe something that we, since we didn't have the right perspective, seems very confusing or arbitrary or overwhelming, is quite accessible. And if you have a really good handle on astrology, and want to kind of strengthen your chops in tarot, again, all of these systems, the signs and planets, are simply the letters of the alphabet. And so this gives us right away a whole new perspective on the tree of life. That this, Mars and Jupiter, the sun, the difference between these upper and lower kind of ideas of this trinity on top compared to the planets surrounding the Tiferet in this case. This earthy kind of vibe on the bottom that looks different than the others, and why, and it's where this vocabulary came from. So that when you apply it to your work, you can, instead of getting lost in the maze of meaning, we can understand that, no, they're all pointing to a concept. And so there's some type of transformation taking place in Sagittarius that refers to the idea of the adding heat that sort of separates and puts into action this transformation. And we name this transformation mutable fire. It's a word that we use for Sagittarius as an example. The mutable fire sign, or cardinal earth of Capricorn, or the fixed air sign of Aquarius. And so rather than just relying on the words themselves and assuming that we and the people we're speaking to using these words knows what it means, is that, I think it's important, at least to ourselves, to clarify where they came from, and so we have an understanding of why we're using that word, and make sure that when we hear it, that the source that's using it is using that meaning, and if not, then we understand where they're coming from, because otherwise communication hasn't taken place, and it just is a breeding ground. It's asking for discord weaponization of concepts that are easily accessible but misunderstood. And it gives us the ability to avoid all that. And most especially to have a level of trust in a world where we can't trust anything anymore. To have a level of protection that we can, at least some of the time, be confident that our feelings are our own. And that we're eating because we're hungry and not because we were told to. Or that we are falling in love with the right thing. That we're worshiping the right thing. That we realize when we're worshiping. I know it's hard for me. You gotta be careful there. Because the biggest thing that happens when you do that, the biggest danger is you miss the actual magic. You miss the unicorn. Pretending that there's unicorns. Like that's a thing that can happen. Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen. Boys, girls. The dude has made it back on my channel. You know, there's a short list of people that I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody, and I lost a bunch of stuff, and I wasn't sure how long it was going to take when I came back, especially that I changed the name of the channel before some people popped back in, and I wasn't sure if I'd see anybody. It is so amazing to see your face and name in my chat, brother. We can continue. The dude has arrived. And just, you know, remind everybody, the dude abides. Thank you for popping back in there, brother. So we're just doing our usual, and at the same time kind of trying to keep it light tonight, just sort of bouncing around, and of course it got all heavy, which is cool. Kind of the idea of not getting too hung up on the symbols. There's a lot of shenanigans. And so the holy shenanigrammaton is my interpretation of you know, the reminder that although these tools are highly useful and highly effective, that ultimately what they are is a tool to elicit a response. The whole purpose of the Kabbalistic system, the Hermetic system, the Rosicrucian system, the all of it, Enochian, is not designed to provide you with some answer. It's there to elicit an emotional response, a consciousness shift, like a gotcha moment that sort of pops you into a perspective. It's a sensation as different as a sleep is to awake. We're awake. There's sleeping, there's awake, and then there's this other state. This other state is the other extreme of being asleep. When we're asleep, we dream. When we're awake, we process and interpret and use symbols and all kinds of shenanigans. And when we're in this state, we recognize those symbols. And in this state, it's the necessity to speak no longer exists, and to define. It's hyper awake. It's dreaming while awake, not lucid dreaming. Dreaming while awake. It's the opposite of lucid dreaming. It's a very different state of consciousness, right? And so the tools that we use, the symbol systems that we use, are all designed around eliciting a very specific state of consciousness that is just as different as sleeping or awakeness. And when in that state, we're able to understand the underlying will behind the thing spoken. And since we have that understanding of that underlying will, the necessity to speak doesn't exist, and we are able to finally hear the sacred silence, finally understand where this all comes from. And so the cards no longer are answers to a question, but we understand who's speaking back. We understand what's being said. And so it actually just becomes a conversation with a divine portion of ourselves, with a piece of us that we can't really access otherwise. And so, in the beginning, we're pretending, just like we always do, right? We use the words and the meanings mean something, and I'm not saying that we're lying, although some people are, God bless. The symbols mean something to us, and we use them, and it becomes a vocabulary that we can build, and we can become a very effective reader. But when we realize what's happening, then we can actually realize that I'm being spoken to by myself, and the thing behind why I chose the words that I do. And the conversation becomes more real. The information is not spiritual woo. It's an actual connection with where it's coming from, and it's so much bigger than the lie. We don't have to pretend anymore. Unicorns are real. Right? Who's on the other side of the cards? Who's on the other side of the pendulum? And when we're in knowing of that moment, when we realize the answer to that, you'll understand what I mean when I say unicorns are real. Or that Christ is both the lion and the serpent. Right? And now where that evolved, you talk to a scholar or two and they'll all have their opinion. The idea of Leo and Tet being the serpent, or the idea of the lamb, the idea of the fish, the idea of the bull, the Piscean era that we talk about with Jesus, the sort of the whole fish idea. The John and Jesus twins, or maybe it's the twins of Romulus and Remus. But there's this sort of Christ consciousness throughout the signs that echoes through time. It reverberates through our understanding, and we have to make a deity out of it, right? And that's okay, because it's an important basis for our storytelling, which we have a very serious, visceral, not just intellectual reaction to, and so it's an important way for this knowledge to continue. But we have to remember that it's actually our story that we're telling. It's not pointing to what's going to happen in the future. It's pointing to what's happening right now. Don't forget, when God spoke existence into reality, we're hearing it being spoken. He didn't speak it. It's happening, right? And so it's going to manifest, and that story will always manifest. That's fine. But let's not forget that that's the case. Let's not get hung up on the characters. What's the meaning behind the very special episode of your life? I mean, the story is going to be told in the parlance. The story is going to be told using modern symbol, with modern sensibility and understanding, and all of the baggage. And so, sure, when somebody looks back 1,000 years at our story, oh dear God, imagine the deities they're going to think we worshipped. The Swifties and the MAGAs, like, what are they going to think? I mean, it's funny what they're going to... I don't even want to know. I'm neither, man. I'm neither. I'm not a Swiftie. I'm not a... I don't know what are any of these things. It's crazy. I'm a Michael. That's all. That's it. I got all kind of names. I am Saturnus Lux. Ooh. All kinds of spooky. It invokes the magician in me. It's a reminder of a character that I play to myself in order that I can use a certain vocabulary that character uses. That's all. And it's kind of wacky. It's a neat vocabulary. Again, it's sort of a combination of Hebrew and Neoplatonic alchemical language. It's, borderline crazy, like psychotic in its nature. The way the symbols kind of turn and twist, and it's like reading matrix code in the world when you allow yourself to fall into that state and realize what it is that you're seeing. But the whole purpose again is to get lost in that meaning on purpose, so that it loses its meaning, and the necessity to speak is lifted. The necessity to understand is lifted, and so the necessity for language doesn't even exist. There's no need for words if there's no question to be answered. And there is that sacred silence that I talk about. Not quiet. Quiet is one thing, but that's a very different silence. No need to know. And while we're in the state of curiosity and witnessing this beautiful bounty of a distraction from the fact that we're all alone for eternity type of dread, we play with our symbols, right? And so let's do that. What does it all mean? Well, if we're the meaning-making machine, then let's take an active role in that and tell our own story. And we get to pick a medium. Are we going to paint? Are we going to draw? Are we going to sing? Are we going to make music? Are we going to dance? I'm going to take half a sec here and just sort of sip my coffee. Tonight's caffeination is brought to you by, let's see, what do we, Starbucks Verona. It's a dark. I like it. I like that sort of bold after that you get from whatever they put in there, like a chocolatey kind of something in there. I don't know. It's a pretty bold flavor. It's not a sweet chocolatey. It's good stuff. Soundtrack is Aimed Ahead. They're awesome. Letting people use their music for streams and so forth, and it's a certain kind of vibe. Undoubtedly, but I like it. There's all kinds of interesting things going on in the world right now. I picked up a new book. I'm not ready to kind of talk about it yet because I don't want to be this guy who watches 5 seconds of a 20-minute video and then comments. Right? Like I want to. Let me take it in, read this book, take it in, and then I'm going to talk about it. My own opinion about what's going on here. But spoiler, it's an amazing book. There's an individual out there, I know I'm being all cryptic, that wrote a book that I wonder if they even knew what they were doing. But it's the new Book of the Law. It's the new Power of Now. It's really great. Now I'm going to be talking about it when I finish the book and have a complete picture of what is being spoken there, and then kind of give my own perspective on it as we do, but it's I'm going to wind up recommending this to everybody that I teach as required reading. It's short and gets to a point of certain things that one of the things I mention to a lot of people that I consider contemporaries are the lack of the usefulness of current language, like angel and demon. That's not useful any longer. And in fact, it's we really need to psychic. That some of these words need to go. The idea of magic. It's so misunderstood, and you can almost not to be cynical, guarantee that you are. If you use these words, that there's a connotation that comes with it, there's some baggage that comes along with their understanding, and you have to sort of fight that, right? That's something we have to deal with if we're in a position of trying to change the perspective on maybe a piece of our art that got profaned over time to the degree that it's been weaponized. That's tough. Or you have people that are on the verge of understanding but still are wind up using it in a way that can be self-sabotaging, or at worst can lead to mental illness and sort of like strange psychotic episodes of kind of getting lost in the maze of meaning and identifying with the darkness. I think it's really dangerous for a lot of people in some cases to approach destroying the ego, or trying to face the beast in the abyss. This idea of the reality that nothing matters, and the fact that it doesn't matter, and that the creation of the identity is part of the out of necessity to cope with that, right? This idea of entropy is always increasing, and how do we deal with the lack of control? Well, we fantasize that we have it. There's nothing to fear. The fact that we're creating fear at all is by virtue of the fact that we feel this drive toward persistence called the identity, and that persistence fears not being, and so it creates this sensation of moving away from the thing that we think threatens that. And very often that is not an appropriate reaction to the moment. There isn't a bear in front of us, right? The house isn't on fire. We're not starving. Unless we are, in which case we need to step up and feed each other. Not when we're hungry, but when we're starving. When we're hungry, we need to see what the deal is. Like, okay, why are we hungry? Is there something that we need to see in ourselves, or is there something in the world that we need to kind of work around or work through that's happening right now, and we find ourselves in a spot we didn't really necessarily want to be? There's a lot of ways that we can help move and navigate through certain circumstances. Sometimes that's not so easy, and that's where we need to maybe step up and be an angel for somebody else and not judge the situation. And we can do that for each other when it's appropriate. And I think sometimes it's not so easy when it's time to step in, right? When it's or when it's time to sort of not and allow that to kind of happen on its own naturally, and maybe that person will heal. It's not always easy to decide, when to step in, and it's sort of, a lot of people think it's their duty in the world to save the world, right? And the way they go about that can be pretty damaging. I mean, how strange to think that we have something to say that's going to heal another person. And so I think the better thing is to just be authentic around each other. Like, you want to heal somebody, leave them alone. Heal in front of them. You want to transform somebody's belief system? No, don't stuff your nonsense down their throat. Transform in front of them. And when they witness it, then they'll make a decision if it's something they want to be a part of or not. But it's their decision. You want to teach somebody something? Learn it in front of them. And so we're not out there, thinking that we have, it's our obligation to change the world by turning everyone into what we believe. Ooh, that's dangerous. Scary shit. Nothing qualifies us to do that. No, we have to just be aware and comfortable with our limitations, the fact that we're going to have our own perspective on things, and, share that, instead of defending some kind of idea that isn't even ours to the death sometimes. How silly. And instead we could just enjoy each other's company. I don't care if you're a Cowboys fan and I'm Giants, whatever. It's football, whatever. Enjoy the game. It's just an excuse to drink beer and gamble anyway, right? Even if you're not putting money on it, it's like there's that dopamine hit of when you get the first down, when you go for it on fourth and you score. I get it. But We don't have to kill each other because of the colors that the dudes are wearing. Like, seriously? Whatever, man. I mean, I don't know anyone else out there that's played video games where you get to kind of decide your faction, right? I know Star Wars, anyone who's played Old Republic and that kind of stuff, you can pick light side or dark side if you want to sit there. Are you really? Come on. We forgot we're playing a game. We forgot we're pretending. I didn't forget. Well, we're all just pretending. And we're pretending that we don't. And we're pretending that they don't notice so that they can also pretend because they're letting us get away with it. And just, so did we forget that that's, just relax. We don't have to kill each other over, colors. I love you anyway. Although I do remember that time when, Tony took a, pretty, that had to hurt, man, when we got rid of your quarterback for a little while there, Cowboys. That's the thing. Remember that period of time where the Giants were just taking out quarterbacks? That was fun. It was fun to be on that side. It was fun to identify with that group of people during that time. It felt powerful. Ooh, wow. Tony Romo broke his collarbone? No shit. Wow. That's Romo? Because that guy's tough. What does that mean? So nonsense. What does any of that mean? How do I identify with any of that? It's so silly, right? But there's a connection and why? Because ultimately it's what we're doing anyway. It's a compulsion to connect. Because there's this kind of recognition of the yourself in the other, and we want to be part of that. We want to remember that. We want to touch that whenever we can, whenever it's safe to. And, what we define as safe depends on who's watching. When you're by yourself, it doesn't matter. But if you're in a room full of Giant fans, suddenly it matters. Doesn't have to, but I don't even know what happened this year in football. I couldn't tell you who was even in the Super Bowl. Is it still? Did it happen yet? No, it's not. Isn't that February? I don't know. Am I early? I don't even know what's going on. How sad. It's been a while. I used to play fantasy and really give a shit, man. I cared. I cared because I had this weird predictive power. I understood the math, and I was pretty good at the office pool. I kind of pissed some people off, actually. But yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with enjoying football or watching basketball or baseball or whatever. It doesn't, so what? 3/4 of the planet, bases their entire life on their hockey team or their soccer team or their, it's, so I get it. But man, imagine if you rooted for yourself in that same way. Just with the level of enthusiasm, That's all it would take, right? That's a good question because, if you think about it, that's sort of the basis of all profit is all. I don't care if I'm 99 cents and I'm making that penny per trade. And there's a chance of it going over by a penny. It will even out. We're all profit if my cost is under $1, right? All you need is that 1%. Man. Although there's somewhere out there is one. Here's the problem is that you can't do that on a single basketball game. You could do it for the season pretty accurately to a degree that you would probably wind up in some, if you did it for 5 years straight, would be in a very good position financially. But that unfortunately would require a lot of resources. You'd have to bet on every game. You'd have to go, and you could not, as tempting as it might be, you can't change decision in the middle of that 5-year period. You just got to ride the numbers, man. And that's a dangerous thing that I know people who get into that game, But to build an algorithm that looks at data and looks at other things and makes decisions and so forth, it'd be fun. Right now you could go to GitHub and get a copy of an uncensored version of various chatbots that, if you have a couple of gigs worth of space and some RAM, can work. I'm able to run the 20 gig version of ChatGPT locally, which gives you a very interesting experience, especially if you want to dig into the weights and kind of do your own thing through some other models and some this fun stuff. Obviously DeepSeek dropped a very interesting uncensored model on the world, and of course I wanted to play with it. But that said, inference on that level would require a very interesting kind of machination on an algorithm. You'd have to kind of take the betting algorithms out there, feed it to the AI, and then sort of have it write a new algorithm that might even include some criteria that we're not considering. Because like you think about, for instance, when Newton was doing the planets, he didn't look at 100% of all the different factors that, when he was predicting the orbits, he looked at three main factors that he knew were kind of like mother factors, and the ones underneath were necessitated by it, affected by it. And so all I need to know is the mass, the distance, like there's only a couple things you really needed to get the math right. You aren't kidding. Well, yeah, there's bookmakers, there's people that obviously it's such a huge mathematical cacophony, depending upon what side you're on of that whole thing. And that's even the funnier part, is that it loses. Now, not only did it turn into a sport, which was really ultimately a way for us to live precariously through the people playing the sport and enjoy that little dopamine hit by participating while not participating, right? The same reason we watch horror movies or pornography. But then we get to the next stage of we're going to start betting on it, and now it becomes an entire dynamical mathematical system. First down, first interception, first carry over 5 yards, first carry over 10. Like, what are you talking, dude? You might as well just have a pocket full of quarters and a penny and throw them up in the air, and anytime the penny lands, to the right, you pay out. Anytime it's on the left, it's so stupid to have that mentality. I take it back. It's not stupid. What it is another manifestation of the same idea of shifting our identity where it doesn't belong. And so it's actually very appropriate if we shift our identity to that space and then work within the space of states that we live in. And if they live in that space, they're just living their lives in the world of numbers related to this semi-quote random event of a game happening between people that are theoretically not fixing it and are just giving it their all, and so to speak, this fair contest. So they're not bad for doing it. They may be missing the meaning of what's actually going on. And, more appropriately, grab a football and sweat with your friends. And when we get old, I'm turning 50 next month. Just do the same thing and complain when you're back. No, but all kidding aside, that's what we're here to do, man. That's really what it's. Don't bet on the games. Remember, enjoy the act of the randomness of it all. You could even put on the character during the period of time, right? You can even spend the time with your hat, your Cowboys hat on, or your Giants. Say, I wonder if it was appropriate to switch over to touch football. Well, when you get old, there's no way you can ever tell anyone that you play touch football. That's your entire man card deck in one shot. But no, you can play the character, and right, and you can put on your Cowboys stuff, and I'll put on the Giant stuff, and we can, throw around words during the game. But when it's all over, we're equal again, right? It was all just pretend, wasn't it? Once you get money involved, it's not pretend anymore. Oh, okay. very clever. Wouldn't that be something? You know, I didn't. What's his name? Vince McMahon, right? Didn't he try to do a ladies NFL type thing? Only it was like the most obviously sort of, just sort of flagrant, like the bikini bottoms and pad. It was just so bad. It was like, oh my god. I mean, thankfully we're not objectifying women by, you know. Oh, they can play football. Just do it in bikini bottoms with, you know. It's so stupid. Well, I forget what it was called. Anyway, was that Vince McMahon? Who did that? Or was that the same people who did Glow? Remember back in the day? Gorgeous ladies of wrestling. that was funny. I don't remember who did any of it. It's comical because all it is a way to give you a thing to identify with, so that you're sort of giving that power instead of, you know, kind of keeping it for yourself, you know. So weird. God, well. But that's all. And again, it's not, in a lot of cases, you can't blame the people. It's not like there's some cabal trying to, you know, I mean, there very well might be. There probably is, actually. But, you know, it's not like the people who decided to make bikini football or whatever, or, you know, I mean, they're gross on their own, frankly. I think it's a silly, stupid, gross, sophomoric idea that is so dumb. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, you kind of can't blame them, in a way. They're just doing what humans do, and you know, the real, just like I talked about before, it's not about deciding what to eat. It's kind of asking yourself why you even thought you were hungry to begin with. It's like, why do we even get to the point where that's considered profitable to the degree that someone spends $500 million trying to make it happen? And you know, it's like, at what point did we as a society decide that that's the kind of who we want to be? And so that, you know, the mirror, the reflection of the system back gives us, you know, big titty waifus. Really, people? That's what we're going to do with AI? Man, I almost could have predicted that, but come on, enough of that. That's what we're going to do with it? Make pictures of cartoon teenage girls in lingerie? For real? Please. Don't do that with it. But you know, I guess that's what people are doing with it. It's really strange, and you know, I realized a way that we can kind of fix it right away. You can do anything you want with AI. I don't care what it is. You want to create a video of this thing going down, so you can watch this crazy sexual nonsense with you in some kind of cartoon. Fine, but you got to pay for it. Meaning that if I'm going to use AI for actual research, if I'm going to use it to actually, contribute to the human experience or my own in some degree that isn't just like flagrantly poking at the limbic system, it'll have its, you know, whatever. But if you want to use it as a cartoon means of masturbating, and let's be honest, let's not overestimate the masturbating shit-throwing monkey that is Homo sapien. Then you got to pay for it. So that the query that cost OpenAI, you know, $1,000 per prompt in energy and compute and all this, for you to have a picture of a cartoon teenager in lingerie, you should pay the $1,000. And then that way you can use it for whatever you want. And what's going to wind up happening is that the AI itself, the data, will become more useful over time, because it'll stop prioritizing that so much in the training data as it gets used, and will become more of a tool for actual truth instead of, you know, another tool for masturbation. It's just enough thought. But I mean, imagine if, you know, if you want the big titty waifu, you can have it, but it's going to cost you the cost of the query, which is the power and everything else to actually make that happen, because, you know, cost a little bit more to have an AI bot answer your question than you think. A lot more. So, you know, I mean, maybe I'm getting preachy on that. But also, perhaps we'll begin to look at human beings again instead of robot art. Like, we'll start looking at real women and respect curves and respect pheromones that flow in air between two people that are in proximity to each other, right? As opposed to what we have now. And so I don't know. It all kind of sounds maybe a little lofty, a little elitist, a little maybe out of touch. Maybe it's a little boomer. I am turning 50, so I'm kind of Gen X. Let's not forget, right? I was born in the 70s. Saw Star Wars in the theater. So I get it. But at the same time, I don't know. Doesn't that sound good? It does to me. Sounds good to me. And then when it's time to tell the story, that we don't tell this one that we've just been fed, and instead we kind of say, no, wait a minute, that's my story. I can take the same idea of everything that's being shown here, the story of the March of the Courts, or the Fool's Journey, or the Stars Through the Signs, and apply that to my life. Apply it to my day tomorrow. Apply it to my understanding of the different parts of myself, right? The part of myself that's the bull. The part of myself that's the lion. The chariot. And get deeper into the story. And become the chariot and earn that right to carry that back up. Or to become the lion and to tame the part of myself that I know maybe is a little overreactive. And then allow that to come out and to fight when ready. Without fear. Or in spite of fear. Right? Who cares who the character is? What's the story being told, right? There are no cults of personality if we don't allow them, and we just realize the words, not the speaker, is what matters. And we stop worshiping the word, and we start understanding the meaning. And we can do that. Most of the time we're going to fail. Most of the time we're going to find ourselves in this weird state that's sort of automatic, and that's fine. And, it's obviously, frankly, works for survival's sake. Well, I mean, if you live in the Western world and you're not on our shit list right now, otherwise we're going to blow you up, and sorry about your babies. But we can have this sort of safety in that bubble, in that automaticness of just, the world kind of revolving around us. But sometimes we look up and we go, oh my God, they're blowing up babies. Maybe perhaps I should get out of my bubble for a minute and take a look at the world and why that occurred on my watch. And is it something I need to pay attention to, or, am I just going to masturbate and throw shit? And sometimes some of these stories, when we apply them to our life and our world and our day and what's going on around us, we can go, wait a minute. I keep learning this idea that there's a thing called balance, and I keep learning about this idea of sacrifice. And I keep understanding these ideas, right? So why is it when I see something that's totally unbalanced or unequal, I ignore it? And it's not some kind of selfish thing of we're in the Western world, and so we're sort of fat and rich and don't want anyone to shake that apple cart. I disagree. I think there's a lot of people who have a deep understanding of the balance and of wanting to not look away, and aren't even necessarily aware of how they can not just get involved, but at least understand what's really happening and how they can maybe interact with that differently than they thought. But maybe they do have some say in that process, right? That they do have some say in what can actually be understood here. What are we witnessing? Looks like I had a little bit of an issue with internet here. My music streaming kind of cut out on me. So I'm trying to start it back up here. If I'm not able to get that working, we'll just have to Settle for my voice. Not sure what it's doing right now. So, but that said, let's switch to a different source maybe that perhaps will change. Okay. That's better. Sorry about that. I've been having such like sound issues lately. It's been strange. So yeah. And again, you know, I'm not approaching this from the position of being superior on the subject, right? I'm just like obviously I suffer the same misunderstanding, the same ignoring, the same fears, the same of wanting to even think about any of it. Like, why? Like, can't we just kind of keep life light and cool and, you know, or that I'm just not in the position emotionally, I just don't have it. Yeah, that's fine. We all need our time to reset and our time to interpret and our time to process and our time to be humans, which are, you know, stop overestimating our capacity, right? We're meaning-making machines dragged by our limbic system, being sort of manipulated from 17 directions anyway, and so we should give ourselves a little pass when we get overwhelmed and don't know what to do and, you know, start to have panic attacks or other things that happen, or feel shy and don't want to leave the house for a couple of years. There's a lot of people out there that have been through that recently, that have experienced this or are experiencing it now. And so, you know, there's a portion of it, a good percentage, that has nothing to do with your chemistry. It has nothing to do with your psychology. It has to do with the environment that we are in, that we were raised in, that we were born into, and we experienced the language that was provided to us from the beginning of our understanding of the fact that we're seeing the world at all, that we exist in it as a little identity as a child. And so, you know, there is portions of it that's related to our bodies. Our bodies react in certain ways, chemicals that we don't control. Of course, there's the beautiful complexity of the brain that includes some unpredictable things that we call mental illness, which is really just a gradient of this thing that is a mind trying to make sense of the universe it found itself in. And the different ways that we communicate these symbols can, you know, and will change our behavior, our understanding, all of these things. And so rather than calling it mental illness or calling it a spectrum or trying to differentiate the hallucination of religion and the hallucination of the occult and trying to pretend that they're a different thing, and just give ourselves a break for a minute, right? This includes the people who are trying to hurt us. God bless. I know it's tough to forgive them. We are blameless when we realize that we are very often not aware that we're not in control. It's when we have the knowledge of that and ignore it that there's a responsibility we have to take. And even then, who? And so it's such a hard concept that I speak it as many ways as I can, and I'm going to keep sort of putting it out there in as many ways as I can, and offering the community to do the same thing. If you have an understanding of this idea, if you've experienced this connection, and you have some insight in how to communicate that, I encourage you to do so. You can jump into the Discord and just it's open and public. There's no nonsense. Just say what you want to say. you're invited to in the stream as well. If you happen to be here live and you want to contribute to the conversation, please do so. It's great. If you want to send some images, do it through the Discord. I'll pop them up on screen here on YouTube, or if I happen to be on Twitch, which I bounce around a lot. I'm on Twitch occasionally as well. And so, to kind of spread the conversation around. Thank you, kitten. And so, who's on the other side of the pendulum? Who's on the other side of the cards? Who are we talking to when we pray and we hear back in the form of the sensation of love, of that we were heard? Who were we invoking when we gather the herbs and calculate the hour, and right? Who is it that we're witnessing when we view this dance and interpret the meaning of the dance? All right, like who's on the other side is the most important question in all of this work, because the signs are many, the colors are beautiful and engaging, and it's so delicious and bountiful, and it's just just a garden of delight. Luminous. How do you not look? It's simply knowing that you're the thing being looked at. So, I think I kind of said what I needed to tonight. I think I got to the point of what I wanted to discuss. If anyone has any questions or anything related to what we talked about tonight, again, I really encourage feedback with respect to if you have anything to add to it, or if you feel like I kind of mistook something that you have some authority to in the subject. I'd love to correct the record and keep it real. And if anyone would like to suggest anything as well, there's a lot of tools that I use to discuss these topics. But if there's any in particular you'd like to see or want some clarification on, like for instance the Enochian, the complexities of how we find these names and how that ties to the court cards, or the signs and planets of the astrology related to the Golden Dawn and the Rosicrucian system. What was Eliphas Levi talking about? Right? And so that's what we're here for. And so ask away, and we can answer that question directly with tools and give access to the process, so you can kind of get in there down and dirty and hear this spoken to you on your own, in your own language, so that the next time we talk about it, you'll know who's speaking to you. Otherwise, that said, thank you so much for everybody who joined. And if you're listening to this after the fact, if you pop in live, it's a lot of fun. And just remember what we are always here doing, what we're always in the process of doing. And, of course, remember that I love you always.